to the
let's
full-scale
start with
invasion is
that
still going.
because we didn't go on last week, and a lot of it had to do with just sometimes our timing. You guys have to trust us that we know it's better to just come back to you a little bit later. We'll give you a better program. And one of them was Independence Day. So let's start with Independence Day because it's so important. We got 35 years since Ukraine is just flat out said, "This is who we are. This is our future, and we're going that way."
Yeah, that's a win already. I mean, 35 years, over 4 years into a full-scale invasion. What was essentially a 3-day quick take of Kiev and home for tier medals turned into over 4 years and 1.4 million Russian casualties, and everything we said it was going to be. Those of us who had faith and had worked with the Ukrainians over, several years prior to the full-scale invasion, I think we're generally confident we'll give them a bloody nose, and we have done. I think we've got them on the ropes. So I think we're doing really well. I don't think, as Fedorov said today, we are essentially losing. I don't think that's the case at all, which we're going to talk about a bit
You just
later
said if we
on.
don't make changes, we're in trouble.
I mean, the ironic thing is, the good thing is what we talk about is we've got the head of. I've lost my page. Damn it. I knew it couldn't all go right, but yeah, let me just find my page where I was sticking off.
Right.
We've got the head of one of the financial heads of Russia, one of the Russian banks has literally said that they're losing. So who's losing? Who's going to lose?
Was this the Sberbank head guy?
Yeah, that's it. I'm just trying to find his name because I just had it up here and I lost it. And it's we were doing so well, but I just lost it. So
sound good.
But yeah, I mean, literally, he's literally said that they're losing the war of attrition. We're behind West. We're behind Ukraine. And you, in the same breath, you've got Fedorov today saying the same things, which is, if you're new to this war or you're new to this. You're sitting on the fence, or you're just trying to find an interest in it, or you followed this all the way. Like, who the friggin' hell is losing? I mean, that does my head in when I hear Ukraine's winning. We've talked about this on previous podcasts. Ukraine's winning. No, we've got the initiative back in some areas.
I gave you the metaphor. I think I don't know if it was our conversation or if I was one-to-one with this audience, but I gave the metaphor that I think kind of fits in my personal experiences that. Smaller than 5'7" at the time, me, because I'm 5'10" to 11-ish now. But I had to wrestle the tallest guy, biggest guy in our school, in high school. Julian's 6'6", I think. And everyone kind of laughed, like, seriously? Like, Julian was so not going to win that fight. No offense, but it was the little guy versus the big guy, and he could not get me pinned, and I got him shoulder pinned twice. I didn't get the count. But I got him pinned, and they were holy, because that's not what the assumption was. The assumption was I was about to get leveled, and he literally picked me up, flipped me over to try to do something I couldn't physically do to him, and still couldn't get the win. Which means, what does he walk away with? This. I ran into him in my 20s, and I love this guy to death. He's still my friend, actually. And I said, remember that time? Please don't bring that up. And that's why I think that's a perfect metaphor when I think about what this is, because the longer it goes on after you started the fight, and same thing with Trump and Iran, the longer you started the fight and you didn't win it, like you said, and now we're going to have the next mobilization. And now we're going to set the next deadline for capturing all of Donbass. And now we're going to set the next measure of victory.
I think it's 17 now he's at. 17 deadlines to capture Donbass.
Exactly.
It's been going 12 years. And we're only at 17. So, I think he's said by August next year he wants it, but he said that every year.
Well, the first one was supposed to be this September. Or not the first one. The most recent one was this September.
The most recent one,
Not the first one,
Andrei Klepach, I was just about to say, was the macroeconomist, economic guy in Russia who said that they're not winning this war of attrition. And he was sacked, 2 days later. But he said this in May. He didn't say this recently. He said it in May, and it was regurgitated through the Russian press. And within a week, he was gone. It's probably going to be off a building through shortly. So, yeah, I mean, it's like you can't. There's so much shit on social media now about, who is losing, who's not losing, who is. I mean, it's like, so you can't read too much into what Fedorov said, because he was part of the government for since 2019, quite high, high up there in the government.
Mhm,
So now he's
mhm.
slagging off the government, saying we're losing. Hold on a minute, you were there, a month ago, and now you're not. Now you're slagging off the government. Now you're sort of saying we need elections again. Very
Mhm.
publicized. Doesn't do it. You're not going to win Ukrainian electorate by going live on Reuters. You're just not. Ukrainians don't look at Reuters to get their political news. So this is, he's gone on YouTube, done his 9-minute video, said what he's going to say. Oh my God, it's like somebody coming up to you saying, "Are you going to win this war?" Yeah, we're going to win it. How do you know? How are you going to do that? Because we just is.
Right, right.
It's exact. If anybody's calling for elections and doesn't have a plan for it, that's how it sounds to everybody in Ukraine. And and I know everybody in Ukraine. It's hard to find somebody in Ukraine who doesn't want an election. It's even harder to find somebody in Ukraine who wants one now.
Yeah, right. Under the risk. And I'm gonna say this, very clear to our audience because some of the viewers here may not be subscribed to my account, but, you have to be really cautious, trying to interpret Ukrainian politics if you don't have a diviner around to kinda help you through who these people are.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
noticed on
yeah,
a
yeah.
Kiev post earlier, I was talking about this in my little pre-segment here a little about an hour plus ago when I said, I'm constantly reading opinions from people who've never been here, who've never been. I mean, maybe they've met a Ukrainian in America or UK or Canada or somewhere else, but they haven't been here. And if you live here, you're going to get so many. Like I basically say it like this: as cohesive as the society is here, no one agrees on anything because everybody's got an interpretation of what's happening, and I think this is great. Actually, to me, it's a compliment because I would be a little bothered if this country didn't have a plurality of opinions, expressions, reasons why they're different. It's like when I talk to soldiers or soldiers' families and people in that particular orbit, I get one set of opinions. Not necessarily that they're unified, but just like I know that that's where that opinion will come from and where it's derived from. Business sector people, aid sectors, and then my organic family life, not necessarily my Ukrainian family only, but just the people I know more on that level. And when I see all those areas, I can say, now I'm beginning to understand. Like, you got to really take all of those voices in to kind of get what it means to be Ukrainian in politics land. And so I mentioned this in the last segment, starting this, and I told you before we came on that someone on Twitter compared uh, Fedorov to Arestovich, a previous
Mm.
a member of Zelensky's administration in the first year, and Arestovich essentially became sort of opposition, but within his own orbit. And now Fedorov speaks up, and there's someone immediately says, "Is he?" And a whole bunch of non-Ukrainians piled on and just showed that they don't know what any of this is, and this is why it's dangerous. Because then I saw people saying, "Well, these people are serving Putin now," meaning the people you and I saw in the streets,
Yeah,
these
yeah, yeah.
officials who've actually sacrificed to keep us alive, and it's very irresponsible when that's going on. So, for our viewers, I'm gonna lay a couple ground rules of psychology, or not psychology, but like fact filler work that will help us get some shit together. One of them was this. Fedorov has called before a panel to talk about corruption, and immediately I see comments. Yes, because he's as bad and he's working for Putin, blah, blah, blah. And obviously that's the problem because now he's going to be charged too. It's not it's not the Nabu Sapu panels. It is a panel put together by an opposition member in the Rada named Alexei Honcharenko. If you are familiar with Ukrainian politics, you already know Honcharenko. Honcharenko's job is to be the opposition voice to anything Zelensky does, and it's basically a hearing in there say, what is it you want to tell us about what you saw that was a problem? It has no bite. There are no charges. No one's in trouble. And if anything, it's a sort of a PR move from the opposition side to capitalize on Fedorov saying something. I'm not saying I know even if Fedorov's going to show up to this hearing thing, but it's not as if Nabu and Sapu called up Fedorov and said, "Hey, by the way, we want to talk to you about these claims." And so when people are abroad are hearing these things, please, if you don't understand it, ask some of us who do and who actually pay attention to it. who really know where these pillars are and what the distinctions are, because that's why I do what I do as a journalist. I go, oh, he's having a meeting today with who? Or he's being called to do what? Wait, it's not even a meeting, it's a what? So everything I was reading to start the conversation this morning was even wrong before I finally got to what actually was happening.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
like I had to unpack the BS to get to the facts to re-explain the BS side of it. And it keeps being a major problem in our supporter class. We have the Vatnik liars, the disinformation guys, all that. We don't need to be worried about talking about them right now. We need our own choir to get their narrative straight.
yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that. It's not. I don't think for 1 minute Fedorov's pro-Russian at all. You know, he's done a lot, and I was a big backer of him, and felt really bad for him when he got dismissed. And I think many people in Ukraine felt terrible at the way he was treated and where he went.
Mhm.
And nobody could really understand that. Zelensky, and my criticism of Zelensky and the government is that they were their own worst enemy. They aided in that.
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Unforced
were
errors.
gone from poor communication, poor time for reshuffling, didn't really tell anybody with any conviction what was going on and why he'd gone. There was this
Right.
thing about, he had a conflict with, Sersky.
Mhm.
And then there was like and then it went to silence, and everyone was just like, well, "What's going on?" That silence led to suspicion, and then people started to guesstimate what was going on. Now you're seeing a month later, you're seeing what could have possibly happened. That
Mhm.
there's a power struggle going on. There is definitely
Mhm.
something different. It's not many people in Ukraine. It's fair to say thought sympathized with him and thought he'd be a great minister of defense. However, and there's a big however here, no, I've not
Mhm.
met one Ukrainian yet wants a power struggle or an election,
Mhm. Mhm.
or
Mhm.
they were pushing for him to bring in these reforms. It was always about reforms, military reforms, and what was
Sure.
needed to
Right.
win this war and take it on. And those of us that were here were reporting on it. And when I was seeing things like these marches were for Fedorov, they weren't for Fedorov. And there was only a few of us here
You literally
saying,
heard people saying, "Please stop making this about one person." People
not
in that crowd.
personalities, yeah, and people
Right.
were
Right.
there because they understand that these reforms need to be in place, like me and you and Vlad and everybody we know these
Right.
reforms and the
Right. Right.
corruption needs to be tackled. So, Ukrainians want elections, but they don't
Mhm.
want them at the fact that they're going to get at a time when North Korea's taken a more expansive involvement in the war here, and
Right. Right.
sending in launchers and specialists and another 50,000 troops. And you could get bombed and FPV'd going to the polling station. And who
Right.
pays for this election when it comes in? We were at nearly 30 billion dollar deficit in our military budget. So
Mhm.
hold on a minute, who's going to pay for this election? And are we going to risk our lives to vote? Is my wife going to risk her life to vote? Are we going to go down and how's the debate going to take place? A proper
Mm.
debate where people can get elected. How are you going to pull people off the front lines? It's just not going to happen. So when somebody like Fedorov comes
Right.
along and says, we need elections, it's like saying, well, we're going to win the war. But how are you going to win it? I don't know. We just is. It's just like we just need them.
Well, I
And
said
it's like,
this to you about a week ago. I said this about Fedorov. I said if there's one guy I wouldn't want to get into the argument with, it was the guy who perceives a neural network for Ukraine's future. Meaning, some of the other people will, yeah, they'll be yammer about what it'll be. He'll actually have a plan. He'll say, "Well, yeah, but we've already done this, 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 and this, and this, and this, and this, so we can." And the one part I do appreciate what he's saying is to say we have to be prepared to take care of our political future. There's part of what he's saying I do think needs to be heard. It needs to be understood that the paralysis of the way in which this for those who don't understand. Let me back explain something here. People may not understand. The decision to not have elections is built in not simply the Constitution, which now we're at 35 years of Ukrainian independence. It's that there was an adjustment made after Yanukovych in 2014 that if under martial law, and this was because Russia was currently invading, this is why it was said at that time it was a what's not a preview, but a what's the word? It was like almost like an omen that They knew then what we would later learn in 2022, right? What happens when you live under martial law? Because as you know, when you moved here, we were not under martial law. We
Mm.
did not have martial law in 2018 when you came here, 2019, 2020, 2021. Martial law kicked in after the full-scale invasion. And that's what this adjustment to the Constitution in 2014 says, essentially, while under martial law, for these reasons you just mentioned, there will be no elections. Now, let's take it from the Russian point of view. Like, you know how I could really destroy that country? Yeah, keep them under martial law where basically they just fight each other. Keep them under martial law where their politics falls apart. Keep them under martial law where they can't do all those things. And then make them blame each other, make the West blame Zelensky, turn the West against Zelensky. So all of that's in motion right now. We see the seeds for that in the way Russia wants to. Look, Russia could keep this at a low impact. They could actually reduce some of the fighting a bit and just keep it active enough so we don't turn off martial law where we never have elections again. And that's what's going to, for me, that's what's going to cause someone like him to come and say, look, we have to be prepared for that time when we get there. Even if he implied now, and you and I both agree 100%, I've got family displaced, I've got family in occupation, I've got, we've got people missing, we have so many layers of problems that no one has to have when voting anywhere else, maybe in Gaza. Uh, no offense, God bless our friends there. But it's um it's that paralysis that starts being problem when you have like the Operation Midas problems around Zelensky's orbit. And this is why I called it, the cult of Zelensky that lives abroad. And I was people who don't live here, but man, they're like, you can't take down Zelensky or that serves Putin. It's like, it's not about taking
Yeah,
down
I
Zelensky.
agree.
It's
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah.
promoting the country's future, regardless of a man. This is not about one man, whether it be Fedorov, Zelensky, or anyone else. It's about what the people are saying, what the people want. And ultimately, that's who both of those men have to answer to. That's my thought.
And yeah, I mean, if you go by the polling, 60% of the country, which I think is probably more, do not want elections right now because they find it, you know, it's not feasible to have them. You can't just come in and say, let's have elections without a plan. So, Fedorov, if you're listening, you're watching, you're glued in, come back with the plan. And maybe we'll all sit there and try and listen to your plan of how you're going to have these elections that, frankly, majority of Ukraine think are impossible. And you've got to remember to sort of give our viewers an idea of how difficult this is. You're dead right. The Russians are using that, and they will use that
Hmm.
tool, put pressure on the government, make it, try and help us. They want to pry open the doors and try and cause as much disruption as they can by keep telling the West that he's an illegitimate president when he's not. But on the flip
Right, right,
side of that, you've got the minute the election's called, everything changes. You've now got you've got every Russian clandestine unit then coming in and trying to disrupt the elections. They
right,
don't even have to have a person, a Russian
right,
sympathizer in the mix to be elected. They just need to do enough to make the elections look like a sham.
right.
That's all Russia has to do, which is far.
So
That's the
that's an important
political
point
end goal.
because, yeah, one of the most vulnerable times in any country to basically topple its power system, and I don't want to say regimes are not regimes because it's deeper than that, is during elections. This is
Yeah,
why the 2016 election, why Russia hit during that. There's a range of psyop options or even active measure options that Russia could have chose. They chose one of the most important vulnerabilities any country goes through. Every country goes through is during elections. That's when you want
elections.
to basically, yeah, so when you want to steer everything around. And here, even more so, absolutely. If you don't think they're crawling through every sector of our society trying to find ways to find fishers, as you know, for instance,
Yeah,
Russian FSB is constantly trying to recruit broken members of our Ukrainian society to sabotage and kill people here. All of that. So they're looking for every vulnerability. And you know, and I both know Fedorov knows this, and he's not seeking to fuel that. But back to the point I think that we mostly have to really drill home is that the West who's watching needs to be really patient about rendering its opinion. When even
mm.
here we have to be even more so. We know this
Yeah,
stuff. We live
yeah,
here. We know
yeah.
we have to be cautious with it. But abroad, there's no consequence for being wrong.
No, 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 no. And that goes to lead to the fact that I've said before, it's so easy to forgive when you're not in the country and haven't lost anything. Oh,
Mhm.
I've got a Christmas. Christmas is, opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one because they haven't lost anything. It's not their house on the line. It's not their country on the line. All they do is watch it on news. So they're quick with their opinions. Do I think Fedorov's with the Russians? No. Do I think he could be really good as the Ministry of Defense minister? Yeah. Do I think he's probably the better choice for it? Yeah. Do I think since all this has come about, he's listened to the wrong people and started to chime the wrong things against what the country's thinking? Yeah, I do. I
Yeah,
think, do I now change my opinion and think Zelensky might have seen that in him quite early on, so he doesn't want him back as a Minister of Defense? There's an argument for
yeah,
that. Uh, do I think he's intelligent? Do I think he could bring Ukraine into a winning position? Yes. Do I think he's got common sense? No. you
right.
know, Political common sense? Absolutely not. I mean, he's saying all the. He's now having to go to the internationally, doing interviews with Reuters. Like I go back to the original question, you can't win the Ukrainian electorate by going to Reuters. This is straight away now, and I would say Zelensky's brought that to the point it is now, a power grab because he's left give him political clout. And now you're in a situation that Russia could exploit largely because of Zelensky and because of Fedorov. Do they have the
Mhm,
electorate in interest? Some unknown could pop in now and clean up because that would be the next thing I would sit there and say is that you got these two fighting. Someone could come in now and under that and clean up when the next election does happen. It's that
mhm,
sort of
mhm.
scenario. I'm just fed up with all of them now. Let's just pick him. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that's how sometimes
No, I don't.
elections
I
work.
think that, I will say, like, there are sort of political clans here. Have been for a
Yeah, yeah.
while. It's a little hard to pick out. And a reminder for anyone who maybe never heard me say this before. In my first year here in 2022, I had done a filming, and I had a person agree to do some scoring. It was not even the most important thing I ever filmed. And I said, "Hey, could you make music for this that isn't canned? I'd rather have something really Ukrainian." "Oh, yes." And then when she saw the woman on my interview compliment Zelensky, she's like, "Nope." Called her a bitch. All these things. Like, what? She likes
There's
Zelensky.
a lot of people in the East that don't like Zelensky, I'll tell you
Um,
that.
well, this is a woman who's a music professor here, and she's hated Zelensky and loves Valery Zelensky. And then I thought about it later as I was learning who these different figures really were, not just their names, but who they were in the society of things. Is that families closely associated to the military, in that orbit than shall I say, just common life, had more of that opinion. People who are closer to certain parts of our society are going to um, have their orbit. But like, I don't know anyone who's like, yeah, I want Petro Poroshenko back, or or someone like
Yeah,
that,
nobody
some big
says
uh,
that
oligarch,
Yanukovych guy was a good
right,
guy. Let's get him back.
right, right, right. No one's gonna be saying that, right? Exactly.
Nobody's going to be saying
Um,
that.
so So for everyone in the West, again, I'm just cautioning that people be very patient sometimes to render that opinion. Be very skeptical, not cynical, but skeptical about
Yeah,
claims,
ask why.
especially not coming from someone here who literally can explain it and lay it out. Or as one person
Yeah.
once said, that the word explain means to lay upon a plane information, and lay it out for you. So if we don't have that, we're going to keep making this decision to run off at the mouth without the proper information, and it's creating a problem.
Yeah,
I
I
could
think
weaponize that
so.
against us. If I was Russia, I could have our supporter class weaponized against Ukraine in just a matter of weeks with the way in which some of these trigger reactions come out of our supporter class. And I'm telling our friends, be wise. Be wise that if you don't understand, you could accidentally be making damage by saying things like, those protesters in the street are serving the Kremlin. Please don't say that about Ukrainians that are
No, no,
here that
no,
we know
no.
are not doing that. Or the other one was, um, I saw a post here on Substack a few hours ago that said, and again, a totally nice person, whoever they are, I'm sure, said Ukraine should not fall into Russia's trap. And it's American. I'm like, I don't think
Which
an
trap?
American needs to be ever say,
Which
well, I'm
trap?
just saying, I don't think an American never ever needs to be saying Ukraine should not be falling into Russia's trap. I think Americans
Yeah,
need to avoid
yeah, yeah.
falling into Russia's
Hold on
trap.
a
I
minute.
think
Have you
Britain and Ukraine in Europe need
Trump
to
should
follow
stop
Ukraine.
falling into this.
Right, right, right. That's where I think it's
Yeah,
going.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. I'm with you on that. I sit there and weigh up both options. I don't think, if you ask some people, Zelensky's not a fan, but I think
Yeah,
my article for SEPA and my thing was about straight after he put that YouTube video out was about how he'd probably shot himself in the foot knowing the general crowd. Even if you're not a Zelensky fan, when he mentioned the word elections, I couldn't help go, that's probably he's gonna lose all the support he had about his dismissal and the way he was dismissed from the ministry. So I think that put a grimace on a lot of Ukrainians, which is why you've now seen the guys that organized the demonstrations now say this was never about personalities. We're canceling that. Why you're not seeing any more protests now. Why people are now that were supporting Fedorov are going, no, that's not what we think should happen. And quite important people who are supporting him saying, yeah, I think he'd be great as a defense minister, including myself. And now
right.
sort of sitting there saying, this is not, there's no way we can have elections unless you come up with a concrete plan instead of just keep
Mhm.
saying, we need them. It's never going to happen. It's too dangerous.
Mm.
There's too many ifs,
Yeah,
buts,
yeah,
and maybes. And
yeah,
I think he's shot himself in the foot with that, to be fair, as much as I like the guy.
yeah. And again, I just want people to be very cautious to throwing mud at Fedorov is disqualifying, and here's why. And I said this to Sean before we came on. I just got back from Dnipro, where you're at, and Mykhailo, and I was out with people who were, training with interceptors and FPV attacks. And when I was in Sumy, we were only 20 kilometers from the Russian line with some units doing exactly that, pretty much real time, right in front of us. And I asked them in every one of those segments, so what do you think about this thing with Fedorov? What do you think of Fedorov? Oh, well, they love the guy. Soldiers.
Yeah, yeah, we all love the
The
guy.
civilians in Dnipro, the civilians in Mykolaiv, the civilians in the Kharkiv when we were through there, same thing. Why? Because they see, like, to me, it's not Fedorov who's important. It's why they like what he represents.
He was the
They want
face of
someone
reform. Whether
face of
you
reform,
want to,
face
I
of
have to say this,
innovation.
that little American caveat you have on the advert where you go, all right to there. That
Right,
sort of
right, right,
thing.
right.
Every time you mention Fedorov, you go, well, Fedorov, he was the face of reform. And you have to say,
Hmm.
well, actually, depending on what you feel, you have to put that caveat in and go, I can't say he was responsible for all the good things that happened, but he did become the face of that. And Zelensky made that happen. He'd given that
Right.
political clout. And he was the
He came.
face of
He became
reform.
the face of Ukraine, like the embodiment of Ukrainian invention
Yeah.
and creativity and entrepreneurial spirit in the fight side of things. So, not the building a cafe,
Yeah.
like building a pizza place. No offense to all those efforts, but literally, he created a place where the best ingenuity could come and compete
Yeah.
with each other for the ideas, and people love that. I have seen nothing but even some people who don't really think about him, they absolutely are determined that
Excuse
that's
me.
important. Buzdorovi, Bradley.
Oh,
Um,
got me allergies again because bloody
and
allergies.
I also, like one of our friends said, is one of the faces of reform. That's a perfect. That's a great wording right there. One of the faces of reform. But um, I went to a lot of Brave One events last year, and I met him in the first year, but didn't really try to track his course. And I'm not surprised that he's essentially a potential front runner to take the country somewhere, because he does represent a side of the Ukrainian spirit I've gotten familiar with without even knowing his name. I wouldn't even have to know who he was, and I would still see that aspect
Yeah.
in the society. I have talked to, for the last 2.5 years, I've talked to so many weapons developers who everything from, not everything's a weapon, but like UGVs, the ground robots we use for stuff. They have to compete with those things. They don't just make them and have them, um, just like purchased. They have to show that they will work. Are they going to work under time
Yeah.
conditions? Can we afford it? They compete, like the Interceptor top speed recently was at 700 kilometers an hour. I was just filming a test just 3 weeks ago where we were like stunned that this thing goes 340 kilometers an hour, and we're like,
Yeah.
"Woo." I couldn't even see the damn thing. Like I was trying to film it, couldn't see it. Imagine one that's 700 kilometers an hour, but that's the one that wins the bid. That's what people here want. Period.
Yeah.
Over across the board. So I think the most important thing for our viewers is to step away from the personalities a bit and just always remember to hold the entirety of the country together. Don't see, like I always caution this about Zelensky, don't see Ukrainian. When you see Zelensky go to DC, remember Ukrainians. When you see Zelensky somewhere speaking for some, remember Ukrainians. When you do that enough, eventually he just becomes a figure. Respect to
Mhm.
him as it belongs, but then you never forget the Ukrainians because that's how I see it. I live with Ukrainian people, not these leaders, and I've met
No,
both of those people.
yeah. I have to
I
answer to
haven't
my
met
wife.
Zelensky. Let me clarify. I haven't met Zelensky. I've photographed him in person in other events in person. Some of them, so same thing.
I have to answer to my
Yes,
wife, and my next door neighbor comes around and goes,
amen.
"Sean, I see what you write, Sean. This is not, So I have to answer to that shit. So I can't just go writing crap I don't believe in, or I don't think's happening, because
Yeah,
I have to face these people in Dnipro High Street or go for coffee or
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's Sean. I don't think that's true. That debate. Everywhere I go, I have to debate what I've written. So
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I get this a
yeah,
lot. Actually, I had it this way. I called, United 24 State Television, and a friend of mine came back, and I said, "Okay, state-funded television." He goes, "Okay, that's a little bit more accurate." I mean, so, yeah, you always have a good Ukrainian around to set you straight when you're off by a little bit. Um, and I love this about this country. That's why I'm so addicted to this country is that I just see that we have an active citizenry who really they pay attention to those things. There's very few people in
yeah.
my orbit of any kind, and I have a range strata that do not pay attention to these things in some capacity.
I'm going to finish on this with Fedorov before we go into the next thing. I'll
Yeah,
finish
let's
with
do it.
this. If he doesn't come up with a plan, if he doesn't start naming who these people that are corrupt are, if he doesn't start putting some meat and veg on the table, I suspect he will fall out of favour very quickly if he's not on that way now. If he doesn't have any substance and just keeps saying the same thing, it's corruption. We need to have
Yeah.
elections. If he doesn't produce any meat and gravy, then I'm afraid he's a dead duck going forward
Mhm.
because Ukrainians aren't stupid.
Yeah, exactly, and, moving on to another thing that if you don't mind topic 2, which I think is very important, it's since it's in the air, defense discussion, is, Zelensky, went and asked for the ability to build
Yeah.
Patriots, and we heard that that was a possibility. We never heard an affirmation really, by the way, just for the record. I never heard one. But
Mm.
it seemed to raise a pretty good idea, and then we got all these mixed signals of why not, and then it wasn't gonna happen, and now Keith Kellogg has gone on record and said, essentially this was in RBC today, um, Keith Kellogg suggests why Trump changed his mind, American defense, giants fear leaks of sensitive technology. I'm gonna go a different direction, and it still involves Fedorov. Um, I heard about a week and a half ago, and I think it's far more fucking accurate. When they figured out that Ukrainians could build this cheaper, oh, the military industrial complex,
They weren't happy
who
with
I'm
that.
thank who I'm thankful for a lot of stuff that helped save our lives, but it's still a profit business. And
I totally
yeah,
agree.
they don't like that. I don't no one in our right mind thinks for a fucking moment that, the Ukrainians are going to suddenly take that technology and go to the black market. That's just the type of shit that's not a thing. They've done really well to honor back to the American side, the British side, for instance, Storm Shadow, which we're gonna talk about. Um, and so it's a bullshit claim in my opinion, and I think there's 2 parts of bullshit. One, I think Keith Kellogg is full of shit, most of the time. And, my juxtaposition is I have a big respect for Lloyd Austin, who is a far superior human, at every level. And, Keith Kellogg has basically mealy-mouthed for the last year and a half at everything so he doesn't ever have to upset Trump. And it's like, you just said something that makes no real sense. You went and you encouraged him, and he was kind of interested, but the tech companies said that they don't want the technology out there. No, they didn't. They didn't say that at all. I don't believe that shit for a fucking moment. I do
No, I
believe
don't.
that they said, "Hey, wait, they can make it cheaper." Yeah, yeah, we're not interested in that part. We want to sell it at the price we always sell the shit at. Because imagine that if an interceptor for a Patriot costs what 1 point something million, I want to say 1.5, but I think it's somewhere between a million and 1.5 million. If you find out that Ukrainians were able to pull that off at 700,000, do you know what that does for the industry? And go, Shaun, it's yours now. Go ahead.
I went to Fire Point. I can tell you on a Flamingo where that sits and what that's going to be.
Right.
Eventually, that's going to be miniaturized, and I don't mean it's going to be like this big. I mean it's a pretty big bit of kit, the size of a lorry trailer. So a plus. So it's a huge missile. When I say
Yeah.
militarized, they're going to put the engine inside it. It's going to be the size of a Tomahawk. It's going to probably fly further, carry a heavy payload. And this is the kicker. It's
Right.
already at 1/3 the price of a Tomahawk.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, give it 6 months to a year, it's going to be faster, better, cheaper. This is what scares the Americans. This is what scares
Right.
giving people technology. Storm Shadow is quite an old bit of tech now. So
Yeah.
it's and I believe Patriots. So the original Patriots was that the '60s design, '70s design originally, probably
Hmm.
earlier than that, I think. So it's a quite an old bit of kit. So, but they still want to. It's about revenues. It's about margins. It's about what we can get for this. And Ukraine
Yeah.
have already shown that they can produce flamingos, which is and make it sort of Tomahawk spec. If not there yet, it will be with what they were talking to me about, and it will be 1/3 of the price. And that's scaring the shit out of the American
That's
defense industry.
exactly what this is all about. This is not about. Or
Kellogg's full of shit. I've had
yeah, he's
run-ins
always
with
full of shit.
him and his daughter Megan. I agree. I was probably a bit harsh on him. He's a service, ex-serviceman. He's in public
Hmm.
service, and I may have said some stuff that were probably a bit too. You forget online sometimes, which is what I said to Keith Kellogg's daughter. I said you forget online sometimes there are people at the other end, and I was quite
Right.
accepting that I may have been a bit strong. However, it's full of shit. He is full of shit, and that's quite a timid way to put it. I mean, he's a Trumpoid. He will lie for Trump. When he was working for Trump, he didn't say anything. He was on Fox News saying Zelensky was out of order for, allowing assassinations of generals in Russia. I mean,
Right.
this is
Right.
what Kellogg's like. Hold on, they're killing kids in Ukraine.
Yeah, he was the
And
one
it's
that
like
he was always going to be on my shit list by saying sometimes you have to hit a mule in the face with a 2x4 to get their attention about people that have gone through everything we've gone through. I would have beat his ass for that shit. I'm going to just tell
he's
you flat out.
full of
Get your
shit,
Secret
man.
Service
It's
guys,
really
because when
is.
someone says that about Ukrainians and all this, like that, tell me what he is. But let's say one thing about that whole leaking of technology. How about we say it a little bit differently? That if we're going to have this Patriot shortage, then Patriots are fucking useless mostly because it make sense to have billion-dollar complex systems that we're not fucking making the stuff that fills the tanks to do the job. Um, the fact that the Americans were firing three and four of these intercepts for one fucking missile, that everyone here goes, sure, Chomo, no, 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 those are Patriots, like they're like that's too many. That's the way. What are you talking about? We don't fire
They
like
were firing them for
three fucking
drones early in
rounds,
this
and they're
war. They were firing at
drones
drones,
even. Like
and your
that's
eyes
just
like that.
basically the
I was
problem.
lying in bed
Yeah.
going, it's like, oh my god, it just used a Patriot for a
Right.
flipping Shahed drone. It's like
Right. Right.
we've stopped that now, but
Right. Right.
you're right. You're right. It's bizarre amounts of money. We need to hit those launchers, not the
Right. And
arrows.
Patriot's a very complicated system. I've studied a bit about what makes it so. I mean, there's the side we all study because one, Shaun, you've been here. I get to see Patriots in a way nobody gets to see Patriots. I get to see them actually launch. I've
Yeah,
seen
you
in
do
one year,
actually.
I have seen so many Patriot launches. It's just like it's always an amazing sight. Like, holy! First time I actually saw that system up close because you can see it from my old neighborhood, but not like I see it now. Um, I literally am on my little video that says "Holy shit!" because it looked like apocalypse. I hadn't seen such a thing, but they do the job. But here's the reality, like you said about Firepoint. When you make these systems prohibitive in some way, something else is going to have to be developed because lives have to be saved. And Firepoint and others are doing exactly that. So those industries need to wake the fuck up, and Trump and crew needs to wake the fuck up that Ukraine is the one partner in this fight that is where that system needs the most testing. There's no place around the world that's going to be a better opportunity for America to test Patriots than right here. And they're
Why
still
do you think
fucking getting
North Korea's here? Why do you think North Korea's bringing their ballistics? Why do you think they're now bringing
exactly,
specialists in? This is a
exactly,
laboratory here for modern arms. And North Korea, still people are silent about it. They're not saying
right.
anything about it. They're not talking about it. They're not raising the issue. It's bizarre, which is why I thought this, the CIA would be visiting Moscow because they would be sort of looking and talking about this. No, Trump's now making flattery talk to Kim. I
Yeah.
don't get it. I don't get any of it.
Oh yeah.
You know?
For a reminder, if anyone who caught that didn't catch that thing when he called off training with the South Koreans because it would upset his friend in North Korea.
Yeah,
Like,
sorry. Yeah, that's just crazy. So,
so
what do you
what
think
you doing
about
in
this
Lviv?
visit? Ah,
It's all
go
yours,
on.
man. Go ahead. No, we'll stay in the visit. The one with Ratcliffe. I
Yeah,
actually think that the one thing that does make sense is that I've heard percolate around his reason for visiting is that with the various things that are happening around a new call for mobilization and escalation, that
yeah.
Radcliffe went instead of Witkoff because Witkoff's just going to eat his caviar and be a little bitch, and so um, Radcliffe, I'm not a fan of Radcliffe. For everyone who doesn't understand,
They said
Radcliffe
he's.
has no
I don't know
reason to
too
be
much
in
about
charge of it.
him. They said he's more of a hawk on Russia than most.
He's more of a hawk on it, but he's also not someone from within in the intelligence life. He didn't have that. He's better than some people are going to be in that role that could be in there. There's a whole range of goons from Trump's administration that could be in there that would make it worse. But like you just said, whether hawk or not, I'm not going to worry about it as much as that he's most likely to be able to go over there and say, "Hey, look, I don't know what you guys are trying to do, but we really want to move this war to a close, not to an escalation." So we'll
Yeah.
see, but I think that's the closest possible read I would have.
I think my London Loves Business Day, my editor wrote a piece today about it.
Yeah,
He was pretty sure. His headline was along the lines of Putin's planning an imminent test on NATO, which forces CIA chief to rush to Moscow. I think there's an element of truth in that. I think
yeah, with the attacks on German airport and other things that are happening, absolutely.
this week Rotterdam and every now hybrid attacks have gone up through the roof, and I think he's subtly gone over there to explain to them that don't start a war with NATO. I
Hmm.
I mean, that would be the most foolish thing he does do. But I think they're more concerned about one of those going over the edge and starting a huge war, with
Hmm.
NATO, Russia, now North Korea, Iran. We're already in a world war. I keep telling people,
Yeah,
and
yo,
that
amen to that.
we'll talk about that in a minute because that's going to lead on to when we're going to talk about why I'm here in Lviv. But yeah, I think we're in a world war already, but I mean, it could escalate. It's escalated even further. I've been saying that for 12 months, writing about it, and I'm surprised that people don't pick up on it more. And you've now got to the point where North Korea are bringing in more troops, more specialist troops, more ballistics, 30,000 workforce to support the war effort, along with India and China,
Hmm.
and it's getting worse. I know Ukraine are now want to, with their ballistics program, want to hit Moscow. There, it's brought there, Putin in sights in Moscow and St. Petersburg's already get. Do you know they hit 6,000 kilometers from the border this week?
That's
They hit
right.
a fucking another plant. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like you can't fly a drone that far. So what the effing hell hit it? Were the drones launched from inside Russia? I can't
man with
find anywhere to
cigarette.
say it.
I'm back to my first year's excuse. Man with cigarette.
11 billion plant just down the pan.
Yeah.
Yeah, something's
And
going on
10
somewhere.
out of the 10 out of the 12 major wild berries locations have been hit.
Another hit. Yeah.
Ozone has been hit now. And actually, the United States did basically point out to Russia, from what I understand this week, like your infrastructure is taking a whack.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It
That
really is.
it's beginning to have its effect.
He's brought in air defense around Moscow is now sacrificing refineries, plants,
Hmm.
logistics hubs. They're really in a shit state. He's got his diehards that have been playing that nothing's wrong, but you can just see with meal bloggers now chatting amongst
Hmm.
themselves saying we're sending guys back with no legs. This is
Hmm.
Russian meal bloggers talking about sending people back to the front with one eye, after they've just been
Yeah, yeah,
blown
yeah.
up. So this is
There's a
like,
mom. I just posted my rather macabre dark humor. It's not even humor. I just don't have any sympathy for these people after this. But
no,
a Russian mom whose son's body was returned without the head. Video is out where I think it was on Threads or one of these other platforms. Ukrainian had posted it, showing that she's like, "What is this? My son comes without a head, and I was given 60,000 rubles. Why are our sons dying?" And okay, it feels good for people who are supporters of Ukraine to see someone maybe is finally feeling the pinch, but it's like, pardon me, you've seen that they've been at this for 4 years and now you're going to complain? Like, that's actually
thank
very
you,
typically
Deborah.
Russian, which means they're not really trying to do the real work that stops the war in Russia. Having an occasional mom here or something like that. No, until they massively hit the streets at the risk of their own lives, it's not going to stop like that. Someone
Mm.
else takes the price until essentially it's like that old adage, they first they came for the Jews and then no one gave a shit because they were
Yeah, yeah.
anti-Semitic, and then they came for the Muslims because they didn't give a shit because they were still anti-Semitic, and then they came for the Christians because that's also Semitism. They and then don't give a shit. And then they came for you, the atheist, because you were too stupid to fucking wake up and realize they were
Because you
your
just
neighbors.
did nothing.
I know I didn't get that script right, but you get my point.
Yeah,
Um,
I know what you mean. Yeah, you were way
is
off with
that
that one.
that's very Russian. That's very Russian to not give a fuck until it lands at your house, and then by then it's like give her back. To me, it's like give her a bag of potatoes. Will she shut up now? Give her 5 bags of potatoes. Is that better? Yeah.
Thank you,
And then
Leslie. Thank you.
so
Some people are
so I
saying
don't
we're
I
good.
just don't see it there. Yeah, I don't see it
Some
there.
people are giving us some praise, saying we come away
Thank you, thank you,
lighter.
thank you.
So it's nice to see when it comes up.
So what else is actually one more thing about the whole Russia's ability to fight the war. So their mobilization, he keeps saying that there's a mobilization, but there's not a mobilization. Peshkov says
Ah,
there is
it's
no
happening.
mobilization, but there is a mobilization. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
but
it's
then
happening.
where are you going to get 300,000 from? Because they just don't easily pluck
They've
them up unless they keep going into the Dagestanis, the
they've
Tajiks,
started it.
the
They've
Buryats.
Yeah. They've. I read an article today, but I'm not 100% on it. I've got to go back to it and
Yeah.
digest it. But I was reading from a pretty good source that they've already started um, this covert mobilization now in Russia. There's
Hmm.
guys
Hmm.
like you. The Russians are pumping out about the Ukrainians snatching guys off the street. Then now you're seeing that in Russia, and you're going to see a lot more of it over the coming weeks. You're going to see a lot of guys dragged off the street, a lot of guys escorted away, and they're going to be doing a lot of that now because they're scratching around for people. They're losing the equivalent of 2 or 3 battalions a day. For those that don't know, it's about
Hmm.
roughly 600 people in a battalion, an infantry battalion, including HQ. Yeah, including HQ. So you're looking at somewhere around 1,500, Russian soldiers a day are
Hmm.
incapacitated in some way. So dead, captured, killed, POW, missing. But yeah, that's a lot of troops. You can't sustain that indefinitely. He's at a deficit. And that's one of the reasons I'm in Lviv. To talk
Exactly.
to some people.
So, real quick, those who
What
are
was
not
that?
subscribed to Sean's cat, someone outside, not mine. So this cat's being a forest animal doing nothing.
Someone's
But for those who
screaming.
are not subscribed to Sean's account or subscribed to my account, please consider doing so. We live to provide you quality information. We actually literally obsess when we're not on this live stream with you about all of this data. We're on the phone all the time. We're physically. You were just here. Thank you for being in town. We buried a good
Yeah.
friend of ours, and we're standing with our friends who were
Unfortunately, we did.
in
It
that.
was an
Yeah,
emotional day yesterday, to be fair, pal. It was
yeah,
a really
yeah. It was really
emotional
hard.
day. Yeah, really hard. And he didn't die in the war. He didn't die from Russians. He did some good work and died on his way in to do some good work, and
Yeah.
it doesn't make it any easier. It's still a shock. But yeah, it was good. We made it good in the end, where we all got together and had a few beers at the end, and
We talked with other
remember
people who know what it
stuff.
means to be in the fight. So that brings me to we'll talk about what you're doing in Lviv, but I'll say this about we were surrounded with some great Dutch volunteers who've been part of this process from year one. And that's really why I said, if you haven't been here, feel free to come to Ukraine, contact any of us who are here, and come have an authentic experience of the people we're talking about, and also what the context is, because the countries came here a lot and did a lot of work, and there's a lot of people who will never know their names who did exactly the same thing. And it's different than what we have with Russia, which is why I want to pivot to this last segment, which is about what you're doing there. And I'll start by saying this so that you get the full mic on it. I sat in front of mercenaries in 2024, March, I think 2024, and they were from Nepal, from Sierra Leone,
Mm,
from Cuba, from India, from a few different places, like that. And they had different reasons how they got here. I went for looking for just work in Moscow, and oh my God, next thing I was in a van. And they talked to different people here. And then of course I watch a lot of the programming, the Russians that are captured. Because for those who don't know about my work, my specialty is our captured guys. So I work the entity that takes care of all that is the coordination headquarters under the GER. And so they take care of all of that. It's the same group that looks after getting our guys home, alive or not. And then we have the guys that are captured. So I want to pivot to this with you, because I want to join you in some of this work now that it's you and I talking about it, and you and Aiden were already doing this, where you get to go talk to the guys who came here to fight and kill,
mm.
um, and like
Fascinating.
what means for them. So take the mic, bro.
Last year we visited a POW camp to go and see. We were invited by the Ministry of Defence to go and see the where how Russian prisoners were kept, and
Hmm.
would we be interested? And we were. That's why we went. We also went with the intention to try and promote an exchange to get our guys back out of Russia. Russia
Hmm.
isn't exchanging foreign recruited fighters because it needs that conveyor belt to come into the country to sustain the war in Ukraine. So
Hmm.
they will not exchange any of their foreign recruited fighters into the Russian military. So, like you said, they come from Africa, South America. Oi,
Right, 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 right.
so yeah, they come in from all over the world, from some of the poorest places in the world, and we spoke to a chap last year from the Middle East who really he asked us. It shocked me when we did the interview. He said, "Could you speak to my mum? She doesn't know where I am, and let her know I'm alive." Which we did. We got Brahim, who speaks Arabic, to go and ring his mum. We spoke to the Ukrainians, and they said, "Yeah, you can take his phone number, ring his mum." So we rang his mum, told her where he was, and she was really upset. She hadn't even heard of it, what happened to him for 8 months. Which then started to move into sort of, talking about that these are people at the end of the day. We want them to go home so we can get our guys back. And then that led to more things. And we realized that Putin wasn't exchanging
Hmm.
foreign fighters. Then we started to ask why. We spoke to journalists who were working on these cases in Africa. They were saying that the criminal underworld is making a shit ton of money moving these
Yeah,
people
exactly.
to try and to support the Russian military, moving them to parts of the country or some of the continent that have Russian consulates and Russian embassies so they could speed track them through. Then you realize this
Right.
is bigger. This is massive. This is not just some guy
Exactly.
coming over from Africa. It's a production line coming from Nepal, India, Sri Lanka, all these different countries coming in where they're promised to they can earn a shit ton of money. So we're going back this week, and we're going to be talking to the guys we talked to a year ago to see how they're holding up, what they're doing and what their daily life's like, and not
Mhm.
to make their lives incredibly, worse, but to just try and understand and make people understand what they're going through.
Mhm.
They some of them are tricked into it. Some of them are professional soldiers and fighters. Some
Mhm.
of those, prison is prison at the end of the day, and
Right.
unfortunately, it could be the Ritz Carlton of prisons. But if you're not going home, you're stuck in a room with the same people, and you're not going anywhere, and you've been there for years with no end in sight. Eventually, you need a pick me up, and an idea of what's going on in the outside world. So we're going back to see how their mental health's holding up and what they're doing, and we're
Mhm.
going back with a team of people this time to because I think we were in a better position. When I did my documentary last year, I was new to this. So now with all the skills I've learned over a year, we're gonna go back and probably do a better piece than we did our first trip, when we went last year. So I find it fascinating because it's like psychology, and I've been at the other side, and I can see
Yeah.
this side, and I do have some feelings for some of them that they've made some mistakes. Some I couldn't give a shit about. It is
Mhm.
interesting talking to Wagner guys and people like that when they want to know what you thought about what did you think about Russian prisons. As one guy said to me, I was like, well, a shit. you know, it's like, and he was the Wagner guys going, well, now you see why I volunteered, and I was like, well, I
Yeah.
sort of understand that, and so
And
it
same thing for the
is,
people in these other countries where life in some places of the world is absolute shit, and
yeah.
they are sold a bill of goods. So speaking of Wagner, for the viewers who don't know my work, I've studied tons on disinformation for a long time, and I part of the Wagner Project, which is one of the side projects for NatSig Media, WagnerProject.org, is I didn't want to just know the command structure. I was looking at and harvesting all the content from disinformation channels on YouTube, like Afrik TV, that has like 450,000 followers the last time I checked, so it might have even more now. And if you turn it on, it's an all African directed network. But when I say directed, it's Kremlin, but it's it doesn't talk about African anything. It talks about Russia
Mm.
nonstop. And one of the things, by the way, Simon Ostrovsky just said anytime, of course. So we're going to bring Simon on as soon as possible to join us because that's part of our
Is
thing.
he
He
on here?
literally
Is
just
he? Is he
said it right here.
watching?
He just followed me back, bro. So
He's like
yes, we're
my
going to bring on
idol. He
our
is.
guru, our guru.
He's our
Anyway,
guru. Yeah, I'd love
he really
to. Yeah,
is.
that'd
He's a
be
total guru.
amazing. Yeah.
So
Yeah, he's just started a
anyway,
Substack, I see. I just like
uh,
a bit of healthy competition. So
literally
that,
just saying, it's like I don't even see Sean. I see Simon. Hold on, Sean. You can
I'm
hang out
here,
for a bit.
because of Simon. I wanted to become a journalist because of Simon. So he's yeah, I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but to this thing with Afric TV, if you watch it enough, and I took, they have three action movies that portray Wagner as these superhero, great military guys conquering the colonial West, and this is appealing to African sensibilities after years of oppression from the colonial powers, right? Like in Mali, when they're throwing out the French, they're not really happy with the Wagner guys right now, or now let's go Africa Corps. But they're
Yeah.
not they're basically taking action against them as well because and I told this to a Nigerian in Spaces about 2 years ago plus when he said, "Oh, but they provide safety." I said, "Excuse me? Yeah, no, they provide a different collar. So I get why you don't like colonialism, but you're just trading one form of colonialism for another because what you have is with these resource what's the word hold on. The like the minerals deal. Anyway, state capture is the word I'm looking for. These
Yeah.
resource deals where they basically like give 30-year control over timber, minerals, fuel, concessions. They basically then fuel warlordism so that they
Yeah.
can keep that. I'm like, dude, you just took one shackle off your neck from Europe and put the Russian shackle on. And I have extensive history knowledge of how Russia played in the 60s and 70s, the liberation movement in Africa and throughout the world, but and Africa and Latin America. But that propaganda in Afric TV and those other networks, Luc Michel is the producer who looks over that. It's a French, African French network. And if you were saturated with that, you would think that Russia is on your side. And you would be
Yeah.
very convinced to go fight with that, even though ultimately they don't recognize that their fate is actually more similar to Ukrainians. And
Well,
so that's where
they're
the information warfare has to go.
we've sort of wound down from imperialism in a way,
Yeah.
and they're winding up, which is just going to be. You could sort of see where that's, Ukraine. They want to colonize Ukraine again, and they're sort of gearing up for, imperialism. So you can tell where the worst side of that's going to be, can't you? If you're gearing up for it. So yeah, I totally agree with you on it. I mean, it's like Wagner. It's very interesting. I find to talk to them. I don't get angry because they're in captivity,
Yeah.
so I don't really. I can walk away. Anything they say, I don't. One guy even said to me in the prison. He looked at me and he said,
Yeah.
"Not all the prisons are like this." So I said to him, "Really?" Because they're not. I mean, it's like you can't tell the way he's been treated from the minute he was captured to the point you've seen him. You have no idea what he's been through, where he's gone. So you have to follow the Geneva Conventions. You have to talk to him in this way. You
Yeah.
can't ask them the questions you really want to ask them, because you can't belittle them, and they can walk away if they don't want to talk to you. They can go. So most of them that wanted to talk to me because I was in Russian captivity, so they were
Hmm.
interested. We had a bond. Some of the journalists I was with, they didn't get looking. It's yeah, it was like
Yeah.
they were
You
interested in
can
me.
This is why I really liked it. I love that you and Aiden did that because as you know, and I'll tell the viewers who didn't know this, when I was at that meeting in 2024, I raised my hand to ask two questions. And the question I asked for the guys that were there was, are you here of your own volition? You are why I asked that question. You literally, my brother Shaun here and Aiden are why I asked that question because of what John Mark Dugan and those fuckwads did to you guys. I thought I'm going to be the guy who sets the standard on this side that says, by the way, are you here of your own volition? And actually, like, yeah. Why? Because they want to go home. They were there to talk because and you know this, right? This is the beauty of you doing it because they wanted to have something other than going to Russia again, and they knew that they couldn't go home, and Ukrainians were treating them right. But journalists had to not fall in that trap. Journalists have to ask
Ah, that's
very
I
appropriate
am.
questions.
Oh, you get me on another topic here. We could talk for another hour on
Take
this.
it.
When I did my documentary, we didn't have their faces on show. We blurred anything that might give anything away. We changed their voices
Exactly.
in some instances. There was no way I was going to put them through the same things we did.
Exactly.
And I still against news agencies doing that. Even though
Mhm.
they're Russians, I don't believe that you should treat everyone as a criminal. Some of them were duped. Some of them are didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. Some of them were forced into it, which means you can't treat everybody the same as someone who
Mhm.
came in and just wanted to kill Ukrainians for money. So
Mhm.
you need to give them some sort of protection because if they go back to Russia, and if I've done something, I could end up killing one of them vicariously, just by something he said on my program. Do I
Yeah,
want that?
exactly.
No, I don't, because I know what the Russians are like. I know they will electrocute you. I know they will cut your
That's
nuts
right.
off. I know they will stab you in the leg, to beat you, starve you,
That they'll
put you in
kill your
prison,
family.
kill you, threaten your family. So I don't want that to happen to any of the guys. So when I see even Ukraine news put their faces on, I'm a bit, against that.
Yeah,
Because
Zorka,
you
you know
just
our
do.
friend Zor was and his name.
Yeah, yeah, I do. Yeah,
There's
I'm
a guy. For
laughing.
those who
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, I actually love this program. I'm not gonna lie, I do love this
It's
program
quite,
because
it's
he said
quite comical sometimes.
it's
It's
comical,
quite
and
comical.
he comes up, he goes, "What do you mean? You want to speak or not? Do you have a form? You agreed to speak. I am speaking. So you want to speak? Yeah, I want to speak. Okay, well then speak. Well, about what? I don't know. What do you want to speak about?" And this goes on and on between these
Yeah,
two.
yeah, yeah,
It's actually fucking hilarious, but he still he's. I mean, even that program, for y'all who don't know who we're talking about, there's a YouTube program with a Ukrainian who interviews captured Russians, and sometimes not Russians, but mostly it's Russians. And some of these are saboteurs. Like I've seen some collaborators he
yeah.
interviewed who say some outlandishly crazy fucking shit from my knowledge of the war here. I'm like, are you serious? Like, you like willfully were like you seem gung ho that you were saying this stuff, and it's raw. It's very raw interviews. But like
I
you
agree.
said, it's dangerous on a. There's a lot.
There's a
Boy, we are
danger.
like we're blurring that
But
line.
the other side of it is if they don't feel threatened, they feel full of
No, they're not.
themselves enough in captivity to say, no, I don't have a problem with it. I came to kill Ukrainians for money and we blew up this, we did that. Means
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
not getting the same treatment as I got. Because I was not gonna go
Amen. Amen.
any of that because I'm not
Yeah,
going to sit there now because I would have lost my finger. I was already
yeah.
injected with something I don't know what it was, some sort of serum stuff. When I was first captured, I was, electrocuted. There was no way I was going to stop. So yeah, I love killing Russians. It's just like so. It tells you everything about their attitude when they're able to sit there in front of a camera and still rattle off that. But one of the things that I got to say before we finish, I got to say one of the things that astounded me about all the captives in the on the Russian side were their institutionalism. They didn't understand a lot
Amen.
of them the war they'd entered. A lot of them didn't understand that Russia didn't allow humanitarian aid workers or any Red Cross to visit the prisoners on the other side. And I asked them that.
Right.
Why would you know that coming from Mogadishu? How would you know that coming from Kenya, Sri Lanka? The
Mm,
Russians will go, yes, we obeyed by the Geneva Conventions. We're part of the UN Security Council. The fact they're
right.
not doing it, none of these guys know that. So when you go to a prison and you sit there and they say, the first thing they say to you is, why haven't we been exchanged? And I say,
Hmm.
well, the problem is that, you know, there's Red Cross are not allowed to see any of the English, the Australians, and then they turn around and say, but I'm Russian. And you can't say in a prison in the west of Ukraine, you're not Russian, pal. They don't give a fuck about you. Otherwise,
Yeah.
he's gonna plummet. His condition's gonna plummet. So you can't say that. But that's generally what and he doesn't. He thinks he's been promised that he's got a passport. He's Russian. They're gonna come for him. 3 years later, he doesn't know why he's not been exchanged. And you can't, in that interview, go, well, firstly, you're not born in Russia. Secondly, you're black. And they really are racist. They will not have. And somebody's probably spent your money before, you ever get back to even claim it. They've taken that. So, your chances are at the end of it, you're going to go back to your country of origin or get the chance to stay in Ukraine as per the Geneva
Right.
Conventions. And you can't say that to them in a prison. So they're still, when I go
Yeah.
back, it's going to be really interesting to go back tomorrow and talk to them again to see where they sit and go, why haven't we been exchanged? And I'm going to go, do you remember what I told you last year? This conveyor belt and this is the situation. Because when I went last year, I'm talking propaganda. I'm talking Ukrainian propaganda. And you go, no, that's the reality of it.
Hmm.
So I'm interested to see how that goes over the next week when I talk to them about, um, you know, uh, how has their last 12 months been?
I felt that way when I saw these guys in there. I didn't have any sympathy for who they were. And I just realized I did ask a second question at the end when they passed it back. I said, is there anything you would like since the cameras were on? Like we were at Ilkrin Forum with all the, you went to the media center with us on the last day and you're like, there's not really that many people here. A lot of media center briefings had very few people in the room.
There
These
was
were the
about
ones that
six,
were
and there was still a
packed.
fight in there. There was
Yeah,
still
yeah,
an
right.
argument and a
But
fight with
still,
six people.
there was an argument that day. But that day with the mercenaries in there, they that place was packed. I mean, it was literally packed. So I said, with all these cameras, is there anything you would like to say to Ukrainians, with these cameras going? And even later when I watched, I went, be careful with that line. Be careful what to say
Yeah,
because you don't know. And again, I had to think about that line about humiliation, coercion,
yeah,
pressure, including like, whereas I know there's no one sitting there with an AK-47 or M4, whatever, off to the side, ready to off them if they fuck up, which would be true in
yeah,
your
yeah,
case. I knew
yeah,
what happened with
yeah.
you
True.
guys. That I knew that wasn't a reality, but I also really don't know what happens outside of my view. I have faith that something outside of my view is going to be okay
Yeah.
because of people like you and others, but I don't have optics in every quarter of the world. And so this is why you don't fuck around with it. And so here's the biggest final part of that. I will say to all of our viewers, again, don't forget to subscribe to Sean's account. Don't forget to subscribe to our
Excuse me.
wonderful friend and soon guest, Simon Ostrovsky, who's only at
Ah,
119. He's got 129 subscribers. Let's get him up in our numbers and let's get
yeah,
our
yeah,
numbers
yeah.
higher
Let's
because
introduce him to
Simon
some
made a
people. Yeah,
post. He made a post that we are talking about. Now, you and I, you're in a little hotel in Lviv, and I'm on my balcony here in Kiev, and he's wherever he's at doing his. But he's saying something perfect, which is the funding to actually do journalism is being sucked up by people who are not
yeah, it
here in
is.
the
Yeah.
war. And I would fight with Simon. I would shut my fucking account down today if it helped Simon be the master of what he does, because
You
I
have to
believe in his
see his
motto.
stuff on Vice News. You have to flog his Vice News stuff. I mean, that was
I have
amazing
every
stuff.
episode of Russian Roulette in file, number one, and I actually have a
Mm.
journal. When you come back here, I'll show you. I have a journal I went and bought, and I literally have every episode notated. I annotated every one of his episodes because that's how I wanted to see. Because he had in person, he was confronting people who were trying to seize the Crimean bases. He was confronting the people who were seizing our country, and he did it while not being a
Balls of
selfie
steel.
artist. So Ostrovsky, and you'll see, go on my timeline, and I'll make a big announcement to back him.
And he was
Simon
captured by the
Ostrovsky.
DPR. And he went
He
into
was
Russia
captured
to
by the
front the
DPR.
soldiers out inside
Yeah,
Russia.
and he is our spirit master, and
Yeah,
so we
he's
hope to
got
have him
balls
on
of
here.
steel. Yeah,
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 and
yeah. He's
whatever I get right around here, I have a lot to thank to Simon for being one of the few people who does it. When I launched NatSeg Media, my first inspiration was Vice News level, like grit,
we can do
straightforward,
three on
no
this.
bullshit.
We can do three on this
Absolutely.
format. So I think
Yeah,
that's great. That'd be great if you
you
get him
got
on,
it.
and then we'll do it three and have a chat with him because I'd be like, we're not worthy, we're not
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
worthy.
we got to get the OG up here, baby. And the reason why it matters is
Yeah.
because you, the viewers, really, really depend on getting quality information. And without you being able to do so, it would really suck. Like on my account, we're kind of stagnant right now. It's not really going up in either numbers or funding. Um, you know me, I live frugal. You've been here to the studio. Isn't it a frugal
Fraggle.
studio? Yeah.
Who's Fraggle?
And yeah. So we have like we went out to eat last night. Remember how much I was just gorging on all the food? I was the cheapest date at the table.
I would have eaten more if I'd have known we weren't paying for it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Sure,
Okay.
Vaughn's on there now going, oh, really? Yeah,
No, no, no. But
yeah.
I mean, I had a Coca-Cola and a little bit of a half part of a sandwich. Um, no, but we really like doing this work for you guys, and we really want to build that this information conduit to you is authentic and quality because for one, the biggest part of this is to understand what I'll speak for myself, but I'm gonna say I know this is true for you, Sean. I don't work for you guys as much as I love you, our viewers, and respect you. I work for Ukrainians in need in front of us, and I work for the situation that we have to. We're literally overwhelmed with the need to have the information world comply with the reality we live in. So our mission every day, and Sean and I are very much the same way this way, is to just gather that information, figure out how to explain it, and get it back to you. But then when we see like people who just kind of like, oh, I've been to Ukraine. It's really cool. So here's what we're doing today. And they've got like,
30,000
200,000
views.
followers, 30,000 views in the first hour. We're just like, I don't know what we're supposed to do better.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
remain authentic. And so to everyone who's been our supporters, thank you. Everyone who's been a subscriber, paid subscriber, if you want to do it behind the scenes a little bit, so that, for instance, like Sean, you're in Lviv, you have to take the expenses to come here. You get lucky when you're here because you have a nice hotel called the Natsig Media Wiretap Studios. No one charges you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And but
You get
it's
Loki's
not true
cot.
elsewhere. Yeah, I
You
know.
get
I got to hang
Loki's
out with
bedroom.
Loki last time, and this time you got to see the little terrorist behind me, Mavka. She didn't harass you, bro. She kept me up all night. You got
No,
to listen to me in the studio room going, no, terrorist, no, stop it, please, no,
stop biting
stop
my
it.
feet.
Leave me alone.
Stop
Can you
biting my
please stop
feet.
biting my feet? Can you stop attacking me? And look at her. She was not like this when you were here, bro.
No,
Look at how she's been
she's
the entire
tired.
program.
And when you leave,
This is
she's like, meow, meow,
disinformation.
meow, meow. Yeah, she loves
Pure
you to bits.
disinformation right here. She's the biggest manipulator in the scene going on right now. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe,
Excuse me.
and
Yeah.
we really thank you.
If you want to watch the documentary, it's on Substack. You can watch Captured. It's on the post list. You'll see it on there.
Yeah.
Captured. Me and Aidan Aslin go back to the prison, so it's quite good.
Yeah.
It's our first documentary. I'm not a documentary filmmaker. We just put something together. Adam Kinzinger's in it. He does a bit. We talked to various people, lawyers and stuff before we
We're gonna
went to
do
make
even
sure
more.
we did it right. So yeah, it's a really good watch if you're interested in how you're branded as a prisoner of war and how we weren't. So
Right.
yeah, and we'll do a better one over the coming weeks.
And by this time next week, our mutual friend Vladi, who was in the Marines with you and who was in captivity, will be a dad for the second time.
He will be. He will
Yeah,
be.
Violetta is she's about to go into the hospital, and so is my friend Anastasia. So we're gonna have those
Miracle
and
kids.
miracle kids. So we're very thankful
Yeah.
for them and to our viewers who pay attention. Please, friends, please take action more than just watching. Please tell us how you take action wherever you are to help Ukraine. Tell us your cool, innovative ideas, things that you think that help get attention to the cause, ways we can get the guys home from captivity, ways we can get the children home from Russia. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah, see you soon. Thank you for joining us again.
Take care. Slava Ukraini, Heroям Slava.
Героям слава.
І пиздець Російській Федерації.